Hey folks. Okay, so now that chapter 115 is out, there's tons to talk about, good and bad. Granted, this chapter finally acts as the penultimate action to end the arc, there's still room for us to have a discussion about whether or not we like the direction that Vigilantes has decided to take to wrap up its series. So going forward, there will be spoilers for My Hero Academia Vigilantes chapter 115, so make sure you catch up and then come through for a drink. That way my theories won't just fly over your head. Now let's head inside. It's getting kinda chill. Welcome to the bar, folks. So, the first thing I want to talk about before we even talk about the chapter is the current reader feel for the Naruhara War arc. Because when this arc first started, everyone was under the assumption that Vigilantes couldn't pull off a long-standing arc. What I mean by that is people assumed that since Vigilantes was a spin-off, and bi-weekly at that, it was incapable of holding an intensive narrative with only 2 chapters a month. What happened though was a little bit of both. Because not only has Vigilantes done a war arc for the better part of 6 months, it also has done the same thing that war arcs have done very consistently: overstood their welcome. I'm pretty sure in the past I've kind of made it abundantly clear that when it comes to war arcs, I'm not really the hugest fan of them. When you have decided to create a war arc, you are taking on something that you know is going to last 6 months to multiple years. With that into consideration, you have to understand that when you take on an undertaking that big, that story can generate plot holes. Characters that you thought once were compelling will become dry and boring. And the worst thing is, if you're a writer who's doing something for an extended period of time, one of the worst things that could happen to you is one of your readers predicts what you're about to do. That's the repercussions of starting a war arc, or that's the repercussions of just having an arc that spans months and years. If you end up becoming a little bit predictable, the story will suffer and your readers will become bored. And before you go, oh my god, is Dan turning against Vigilantes? I am not. 4 bad chapters do not make up for 100 chapters of something that has blown me away. Every title has growing pains, but if I were to say something that really is kind of talking out of my ass and I don't know the situation whatsoever, I would say that Betancourt and Furuhashi probably had the wrap up to this story planned about a month ago, and now his editors or the publishers are telling them to drag out the story. And the only reason why I'm even saying something like that is because we've had 3 instances where Koichi has been almost killed, letting us believe that it might be the ending to the arc, when it hasn't. So it gives us that constant feeling of, when is this going to end? Now it just feels like it's going to be dragged out. When's the next moment where number 6 gets a power up and then causes another dramatic cliffhanger where we think Koichi might die? This arc, the Naruhara War, or rather the Nightmare Night in Naruhara, it's done many things to show us that the town of Naruhara in current day My Hero Academia is probably destroyed, decimated, and abandoned at this point. And in hindsight, thinking about that, a completely abandoned town could be a perfect place of refuge for a bunch of students to hide out at. Essentially what I'm saying is, don't be surprised if UA ends up moving to Naruhara. It probably won't, but don't be surprised. Actually, let's head over to the wall right now because I got a feeling this is turning into a massive rant. Anyway, I'm derailing a little bit too hard. What I'm getting at is people have been very vocal, to me at least, that this arc is dragging on for entirely too long. And to those that have reached out to me, most of you have a legitimate claim to be angry, or rather frustrated, if this does turn out to be the final arc of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. In hindsight, my recommendation for reading My Hero Academia Vigilantes would be telling the average reader not to read Vigilantes chapter to chapter, but to wait and then binge it. And when I mean binge this particular arc, because it's been very, very dry to read this week to week. Like I said before, if you take this particular arc and switch it with the Stendhal arc, I would tell everybody to read Vigilantes week to week because I knew that the Stendhal arc was going to have a finite ending at some point. This particular arc has had the same type of action for the past 15 chapters, because while it's had its moments like Knuckle Duster's return or Koichi's quirk awakening, seeing the bad guy have 5 final forms, it's tedious and it begs the question when he'll he'll be defeated. I don't know, let's be real a second. How many other bad guys do you know that have over 5 transformations? I'm pretty sure the only bad guy in Shonen that I know of that has about 5 or 6 transformations is Frieza from Dragon Ball. And what's funny is, in that comparison between number 6 and Frieza, number 6 is essentially doing the same exact thing that Frieza did to Goku. Frieza knew that they were going to lose against Goku, so in the final moments, Frieza took the decision to try to blow up planet Namek to assure that Goku would die. Number 6 has turned into a gigantic plasma kaiju that is starting to actively burn himself out. It's become abundantly clear now that number 6 will not survive this event, meaning that this particular attack on Koichi is number 6's final attack, and he's hoping that this will be the attack that finally puts Koichi in the ground. Because the caveat is, this is the attack that puts him in the ground. So essentially, number 6 is trying to get that satisfaction of killing his rival before he dies. And essentially what this scene is All For One seeing that the strongest motivator for him possibly to get One For All is that of hatred. If he can garner enough hatred inside of a human being, the possibility for him to get the world's strongest quirk becomes even more possible. And the reason why I think that this chapter is the penultimate chapter to the arc is what's happened to number 6 and Koichi. Number 6 has attained this final form that is certainly going to kill him, and for the first time in My Hero Academia Vigilantes, we see Koichi dealing with some serious injuries. And when I mean injuries, I mean recovery girl level of injuries. He has a broken leg and a compound fracture in his arm because his arm is leaking everywhere. In addition to that, he's got a bunch of broken ribs, so for all we know, those broken ribs will eventually puncture a lung as well, and since he can't breathe, that means that he wouldn't be able to use his quirk either. So, the final moment of this chapter that we see is number 6 cocking back for his strongest punch and a mortally wounded Koichi in the building down below. Now, like I said, this is the most wounded that we have ever seen Koichi, and the way that it's depicted, he is bleeding all over the street. And now that the news is involved and this is getting coverage around Japan, it is only a matter of time before All Might shows up, because we saw back then that All Might was watching TV, and when he watches TV, that's how he tends to know where the incidents are going to be. It's only when something really bad is about to happen that his might sense begins to fire off. It went off against Hood during the Underground Fighting Ring arc, but now he's a little bit older, the wound has happened where he's not as strong as he used to be, and my guess is maybe some of his abilities are suffering because of that. And we've seen that one of the major reasons why he hasn't shown up in Naruhara yet is because he's going all across Japan to stop all different types of incidents. But now that Koichi has finally been backed into a corner, I think it's safe to say that either he does one final quirk transformation where Koichi becomes this crazy hero, or his hero finally shows up to acknowledge him and ends the fight in a very Saitama kind of way. And if you have no idea who Saitama is, he's the One Punch Man. He's literally a gag character for all of the other characters that take place inside of that universe. Everyone's trying to be the strongest hero they can possibly be, and they're fighting against these crazy threats, and when they get beaten up, oh, here comes One Punch Man. One Punch Man in this aspect is All Might. Do I kind of agree with that ending? Not really. I really wanted Koichi to step up and be the guy that really puts an end to this and proves that All Might isn't needed at some points. Cause while admittedly I've been a little bit of a pessimist about this current arc, thankfully I have subscribers like all of you. Cause while I'm down here being a little bit of a pessimist, I have subscribers like Esrael over here, who explained to me on Twitter that they're actually fine with the current story in Vigilantes because right now this is just the denouement of the story. Now, if you don't know what the denouement of the story is, essentially it's the moment in the story where the plot kind of ties in with itself, and it's that big aha moment. It's not the climax, it's the moment where everybody understands why everything is happening. Let's call it the moment in the narrative where the strands of the plot are drawn together and the matters are explained or just resolved. They see the final form of number 6 as Koichi facing his ideal in all of its true destructiveness. That this moment is the defining moment in his life to prove to himself, will he be able to survive this, or will it bury him and his dreams? Because when you do think about Koichi's entire career as a hero slash vigilante, he started out picking up garbage, returning people's cell phones, and giving directions. Now he's out here protecting an entire town that has inhabitants. Like their tweet says, it shifted from a battle just to simply seeing if Koichi can survive at this point. And man, all the parallels that are being drawn between Koichi and All For One and Number 6 and All Might right here is absolutely amazing. Number 6 is being compared to All Might in this current situation because All For One knows that All Might compromised everything that he is as a person to try to defeat All For One, but All For One is still alive. While the flip side is the one person that could have possibly defeated him has a giant hole in his chest and now has to find a new successor to One For All. Now, if I had to guess about what's going to happen in Chapter 116, now if All Might doesn't show up, because that is the most likely option here, All Might will show up and save Koichi. But on the off chance that he doesn't, well, there's a few different situations that could come of this. One could be that the heroes rescue Koichi, 2 could be that All Might rescues Koichi, or 3 could be that Koichi disappears in the rubble. Though that whole shit aside, if the next chapter is just jumping to the end and just gives us a summary of what just happened in the story, I will be so overwhelmingly mad it won't be able to be contained in a video. Like if this somehow jumps to the crawler's been missing for 6 months and now all this stuff is happening in My Hero Academia and he comes out of the woodwork, I would be a little bit kind of jaded to see how they would even do that and pull it off. I need a proper ending. I don't need this to end the volume with one final chapter that just wraps up everything and just goes, okay, bye everybody, see you later. No, that's not gonna do it, which tells me that at least at the minimum there's probably 7 or 8 more chapters of Vigilantes. That is if they don't end the series on Christmas Day. If they do, you will see a very, very unhappy Dan on Christmas. I will essentially become the Grinch. Vigilantes deserves a proper ending, but also in addition to that, it deserves a way for it to smoothly transition into My Hero Academia, because they've woven this rich backstory in Vigilantes that if it just doesn't get used in My Hero Academia, it's the biggest loss. Everything in the story has paralleled one another, and we've seen that the precedent for Vigilantes and My Hero Academia to cross over usually happens from November to January. Shirakumo died in Vigilantes in like mid-November, more December, and then it was revealed in My Hero Academia that Kurogiri was Shirakumo that January-ish, right before the war arc started. So if they did have intentions of having the Vigilantes eventually cross over into My Hero Academia, I would expect it to happen in the January-February timeframe. If not, I'm completely wrong. Oh well, shame on every single editor for not taking advantage of a side story that's been going on for the better part of half a decade. And for some of us that kind of feel bad about tossing criticism towards one of our favorite stories, don't feel that bad. Every story should be open to criticism. Just because you criticize something doesn't mean it's not one of your favorite sources of material. Look, an overwhelming majority of us did not like season 6 of My Hero Academia, but my guess is if you go back and read the manga at that point in time, every single one of us was stoked because what was happening week after week. There will always be artistic decisions that you won't exactly agree with. So look, that aside, let me know how you felt about this chapter. I really want to know your thoughts. Has Vigilantes become a little bit stale for you? Let me know why. And if it's the opposite, let me know why as well. Let me know why Vigilantes is still one of your favorite manga to read every week, or bi-weekly, whatever. Though, until next time, I'll catch y'all later. Cheers.